Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. May I invite you to take your seats so we can start the session. Thank you. Everything you need to know about the event is there, in one convenient location. This includes the agenda, biographies of speakers, details on both exercise, information on assets, and important timings for today. If you need any help during the event, please ask any member of the support staff who can be identified by the green stripe on their badges. You will note that all your badges have an additional card with a letter and numbers. The letter indicates the group you are in, and the numbers are the order in which you will be going through the displays. We kindly ask you to follow those to ensure a smooth and flawless movement through the displays. We are currently sitting in the presentation hangar. Following the briefings this morning, you will move with your group to one of the other locations and start tour from there. At 12:30, we'll meet up at the runway for a group photo and lunch. To start this event, let us look at a short video that our teams recorded over the last 2 weeks. This video offers an insight into the naval mine warfare activities that are being currently conducted in the littoral exercise areas of Tróia Peninsula, controlled from the other exercise site located at Sesimbra.
Welcome aboard. The robotic experimentation and prototyping augmented by maritime unmanned systems, known as REPMUS, is an international exercise focused on testing the capabilities of new generation maritime unmanned systems. REPMUS will be planned, coordinated and conducted at the Portuguese Navy's Operational Experimentation Center, CEOM, based in the peninsula of Tróia and in an area of more than 400 square nautical miles inside the Portuguese exercise areas. Several military and civilian entities support and attend the exercise, and it is expected in this year's edition the participation of 17 navies, more than 50 research and development companies, several universities, and 8 NATO bodies related to maritime operations and maritime unmanned systems.
Bem-vindos! A Marinha Portuguesa dá as boas-vindas ao Exercício REPMUS e ao Dynamic Messenger 2022.
This is the Maritime Operations Center here at Sesimbra. Inside of this tent we have more than 150 persons. We work all together, we talk each other, and that's a very beneficial thing among the naval mine warfare community.
These are only the first steps on the road to future NATO naval mine countermeasures. But in order to continue, we need you.
As the first one of speakers this morning, it is my great pleasure to introduce Admiral Henrique Gouveia Melo, Chief of the Portuguese Naval Staff and REPMUS organizer, for his opening remarks. Sir, the floor is yours.
Minister of Defense, Excellency, Secretary of State for Defense, Secretary of State for Economic Defense, your presence is an honor and motivation for the work we are doing. Now I would like to thank you, all participants in the exercise robotic experimentation prototyping, exercise augmented by maritime unmanned systems, and NATO exercise Dynamic Messenger 2022. On behalf of the Portuguese Navy and our partners in the REPMUS exercise, namely University of Porto, NATO Center for Maritime Research and Experimentation, and NATO Maritime Unmanned Systems Initiative, I greet you all for bringing together leaders and innovators of marine technology, engineering, science, research, and academia. Thank you very much, you all, for your enthusiasm, efforts, and commitment that contribute to the success of this event. Unmanned systems are changing how navies conduct naval operations. They are not the future, but the present already. Nevertheless, there are still many challenges to overcome. We need to increase the use of artificial intelligence in these systems and raise a secure and resilient way to operate the C2 architecture. There is a long way to go. The road ahead will have surprises and storms to overcome, marked by successive trials and errors, by advance and retreats. Innovation and technological advance are achieving by this way without rest and fear, but with courage and commitment. In my opinion, innovation is not happening by decree, but by experimentation, research, and a strong will to change and adapt. All these challenges justify carrying out the REPMUS. You can count on my personal commitment to support new initiatives, new ideas, and why not, your technological madness. This Center of Experimentation of Maritime Environment, in fact, service activities that we will execute and provide. I highlight the availability of the infrastructure and service to support experimentations, the command and control building and structure, specialized technological support, workshop space for rapid prototyping, mechanics and electronics, qualification validation for the Navy, qualification mark. This site is an accelerator of disruptive technologies which are also for dual use, military and non-military. The Portuguese government established a name Infante Dom Henrique, our first discovered, the Free Technologic Zone, which is an area, as the slide shows. The Free Technological Zone will be sensorized by a digital twin. It will allow, during the experimentation testing, information in real time about the environment. The FTZ will be a unique place to try out your equipment, your ideas, and your dreams. Together, we will achieve more. I believe that navies will be stronger if they receive support and partnership of academia and industry. This is the reason why I invite you to work with us. Due to the geophysical characteristics of this area where the Stubble Canyon is located, it is also important to highlight that in this zone will allow exploring deep and shallow waters through new and revolutionary technologies, essential for those who have a need to explore, like Portugal, a huge continental shelf. The NATO Defense Initiative the NATO Defense Innovation Accelerator for the North Atlantic, DIANA, is an instrument that aims to accelerate the development of emerging and disruptive technologies, solutions within NATO, mainly dual-use technologies with applications in the real area of security and defense. Portugal was chosen to host 2 defense innovation centers within the scope of DIANA. The Portuguese Navy will be strongly committed to development of technologies related to big data, artificial intelligence and new materials. The digitalization of the sea, the connectivity of different environments and implementation of a multi-purpose platform will ease the future of operational experimentation. These are our dreams. Finally, I am sure that during these days we have taken important steps to the future. Today, I am confident we are better prepared to do science, to develop new technological products, new ideas, and ready to overcome adversity and to keep peace. Thank you.
Thank you, Admiral. It is now my pleasure to give the floor to the Commander of NATO Allied Maritime Command and Dynamic Messenger Co-Organizer, Vice Admiral Keith Blount, for his remarks. Sir, the floor is yours.
Ministers, Chairman, Sir, Admiral, Sir, fellow flag officers, general officers, distinguished visitors, ladies and gentlemen, it's with great pleasure and a large degree of pride that I am here today on this very important day in the Alliance's present and, of course, future. I want to explain a little bit about how this all came about, and I can take a small degree of personal credit, but only a small degree of personal credit, and that is that when I was serving in the depths of the Royal Navy, we conducted an exercise called Unmanned Warrior off the coast of Scotland, off the Hebrides. It was a great success, and it partnered the military with industry to generate some thought, to demonstrate some capability, and to conduct some experimentation to try and map the Royal Navy's future into a new capability period. I thought that NATO should do something similar and that the maritime could take the lead. So in my office on one day, more than 2 years ago, I thought of Dynamic Messenger. All the exercises that are conducted from the maritime headquarters in Northwood start with the word dynamic, and the second word always starts with the letter M for Mike. So I had to think of a name that fitted, and I randomly came up with Messenger. And I walked out of my office with this good idea in my head, but absolutely no idea how I was going to execute it. It was not my comfort zone. It was not something I had ever done before. I was not a deeply experienced exercise planner. And very fortunately, I had a commander on the staff from Portugal called Antonio Marinha, one of the finest commanders I have ever served with, and I was very proud to have him on my staff, and I know that he now represents the Portuguese Navy equally well here. But he said, "Sir, I can help. I've been involved in an exercise called REPMUS in Portugal." He said, "We do this stuff." And he said, "We've also got a base that we can do it from called Tróia." He said, "All you've got to do is get the permission of Portugal to make it all happen," which was a fair challenge to me, but I had the absolute security of knowing that Antonio was on side to help put it all together. Now, fortunately, the fleet commander of the Portuguese Navy at the time was a guy called Alberto Silvestre, who I knew very well because when I was Commander Sea Training at FOST, he commanded one of the Portuguese ships that came through and, of course, did very well, as the Portuguese always do. It's through that kind of friendship that develops in your service career that you can sort of tap and draw on when you need to. And I phoned him up and he said, "Keith," he said, "I think this is a good idea. I think this can ride sort of shotgun with REPMUS. I think we can do it." He said, "I need ministerial approval." He said, I've got to go to the ministers. And he said, that's difficult for me to get diary time with the minister, but I'm sure if I can achieve it, he would be interested. Within a day of that discussion, I flew to the Munich Security Conference in 2019, just before COVID broke out. And at the dinner in the evening, this gala dinner, where there were literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of delegates, the gentleman on my right was the Portuguese Minister of Defence, by pure chance. And I spent the evening talking to him about Dynamic Messenger, probably boring him with Dynamic Messenger, until he conceded that he would support readily. And of course, from that chance and luck, because it really was chance and luck, we were able to take what was a good idea further forward. But of course, it didn't stop there. We needed to get other people on board, other people to help, industry. I remember going to DSEI in the Excel Centre at London and walking that great kilometre through all of the different showpieces of defence equipment and trying to gain interest. And we got some interest. People like Commodore David Burton, Catherine Warner from the Centre for Maritime Research and Experimentation came on board. And it was through discussions with them and an awareness of things like the Maritime Unmanned Systems Initiative within the Alliance that it became clear to me that we needed to do this in partnership with ACT. We needed to breathe some ACO life into the NATO warfighting capstone concept. And we could do that by joining arms in partnership and delivering quite uniquely an exercise together, hosted, of course, through the generosity and support of Portugal. As we got to the point where the exercise was starting to really get complex, we had a rotation of DCOS plans in the headquarters. And DCOS plans is rotated between Canada and what other nation than Portugal. In walked Diego Artea at the one-star level to say, sir, I'm all over this. We can take this through to the finish line. And under your leadership, Diego, we absolutely did. So with academia on board as well, of course, we now find ourselves here at what is, for me personally, a very significant and proud day in my 38-year career. And of course, I think we all recognize the importance of what we are achieving here. We all know that we need to think ahead to stay ahead. We all know that we need to innovate, embrace technology, bring it in an integrated fashion so that we blend the capability of tomorrow with the capability of today. That is what Dynamic Messenger is about, and it feeds naturally from REPMUS. So to all the individual nations, my own of course, that have contributed to this exercise and making it happen, I thank you. The fact that we have filled this room to beyond seating capacity and we have standing room only at the back gives an indication of the interest that this has generated. And I know that this will be something that will be publicized on a world stage. We know that the Alliance is the strongest alliance in the world. And I would say far more than this exercise, this partnership of two exercises will keep NATO ahead. It will accelerate NATO so that we become even further ahead. This will become an annual exercise in the NATO calendar. I'm very excited to be here and to have been part of the journey. Thank you for showing your interest and your support, and I look forward to the day ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Admiral. Next, we will take a more strategic look at experimentation at NATO. It is my pleasure to introduce Vice Admiral Guy Robinson, Chief of Staff of Allied Command Transformation, who is co-organizing dynamic messaging along with Marcom. Admiral, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I hope this dynamic microphone is going to work. Secretaries of State, Chairman of the Military Committee, Chief of the Portuguese Navy, Admirals, Flag Officers, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. On behalf of General Philip Levine, who is the Supreme Allied Command Transformation, welcome to this part of ACT's contribution to this exercise. I've been the Chief of Staff at Allied Command Transformation for some 15 months, And I have to say, that was one of the early things on my to-do list when I arrived, and I had a call from my good friend saying, I think ACT needs to lean in a little bit harder into this exercise, and I hope we have been able to do that over the last 15 months. I just want to make 3 points today to land with you. Firstly, I'm going to say a very few words about ACT, probably the least well understood of the 2 strategic commands in the Alliance. And I want to say a little bit about the experimentation journey that ACT has been on and is on today. I want to say why we are here at Dynamic Messenger today, and I want to articulate what ACT is bringing to this exercise. So firstly, just to say some words about Allied Command Transformation. We are NATO's Warfare Development Command, as titled in 2018 as part of the Alliance adaptation process. But of course, that term doesn't necessarily translate equally. It's not necessarily a fully understood term. But what are we doing in essence is we are trying to provide for the Alliance a concise definition of the future operating environment that we are going to find ourselves operating in. We're going to identify the current state of NATO's military instrument of power. We're going to identify how we think that military instrument of power needs to look to operate in that future environment, and then we're going to try and chart a journey from current state to future state. That really is the essence of our role. And that has been really brought into sharp focus, as Keith mentioned earlier, through the recently approved NATO warfighting capstone concept, alternatively called NATO's North Star, but it is a way to chart that journey, a 20-year vision of how we're going to adapt NATO's military instrument of power. Of course, within that document, there are many lines of activity and many ideas to be taken forward over the next 20 years. And of course, there's a real sense of urgency to be getting on and delivering much of that warfighting concept. But underpinning it is very much a sense that we need to innovate and we need to experiment. And hence, our relevance here today and our significant interest in Dynamic Messenger. It's certainly clear from the analysis and the work that is ongoing as we reorientate our program of work in Allied Command Transformation that the demand signal for experimentation can only accelerate. And if it doesn't accelerate, then we are doing something wrong. But historically, experimentation within the Alliance and within NATO exercises is not as simple as it may first appear, even when there's an instinct that we have to do more experimentation, because there are always competing priorities with experimentation. We have some hugely sophisticated and complex exercises, whether they're computer-assisted or whether they're live exes, but there is always a tension between a commander achieving his training objectives and his certification and the opportunity to place experimentation into those exercises. And the problem is, if you just put experimentation into an exercise, not necessarily as an afterthought, but it may be in a bubble alongside the commander, it doesn't get the command attention, it doesn't get the focus. The real benefit of this exercise that Admiral Blount is driving forward is the focus is on experimentation, albeit within a training wrapper. And this is where you can get the real insights and experimentation. So I'm very grateful for the opportunity to see how this worked. Equally, if we run live exes that are solely focused on experimentation, and we have done this before, we have sometimes struggled to encourage allies to turn up. But in this exercise, and with the basis of the standing naval groups, we have a great cadre of assets here and a real opportunity to take this forward. Within ACT, I am determined to start to build out a longer-term experimentation plan. The military committee approved our experimentation plan, but it's reasonably short-sighted. It looks a year out and when they approve it. If we're not able to develop a 5 or 10-year plan for experimentation, we cannot expect allies to turn up with the right equipment in sufficient volume because it is far too short planning horizon for them. So we will build out, under the NATO warfighting capstone concept, a more substantial and progressive experimentation plan going forward. We're also working harder to bring ACT expertise into NATO exercises, to sit alongside the leadership of those exercises and our senior mentors to make sure we are able to extract every piece of warfare development insight we can and then recycle that under the NATO warfighting capstone concept so we can accelerate our innovation, and we can bring these good ideas into NATO doctrine sooner and more effectively. So that's my first point. Second, why are we here? Well, as I've said, because Keith asked me to be here, and he's a good friend, and I didn't want to let him down, so that's one very good reason for turning up and supporting him. We have tried to provide in this exercise a tailored approach for experimentation, assessment, and analysis, EAA, because we've had to come together with Marcom's very operationally focused staff and our expertise within operational experimentation to find an accommodation about how we can get the right outputs from this exercise. So we've worked very closely together in the syndicates that have built the exercise to understand how we get the right outputs that we need to really take forward the lessons from here. But also, I'm particularly keen to use this first exercise to understand better many areas. Firstly, how might this exercise evolve? This is within the maritime domain, clearly, although we're looking at air, surface, and subsurface assets. But what would it mean in the future for the other domains? How do we exploit an exercise like this in other domains? Because, in case you had missed it, NATO is on a journey for multi-domain operations. We aimed and aspire to be a multi-domain enabled alliance, and we're going to have to work out how we join many of those parts together, and we're going to need LiveX opportunities to do that. Now, we have to be careful we don't stumble over ourselves. We've only just written our MDO concept, but we do need to look to the future to work out how we can start to use exercises like this in the other domains, and then to bring those domains together. We also run an exercise every year called CWIX, the Coalition Interoperability Warrior Exercise, which is done at our Joint Force Training Center in Bydgoszcz, Poland. That brings numerous allies and industry together in a safe environment, i.e. in a private classified network, where they can bring in all sorts of capabilities and trying to connect them. And that is a really busy and highly experimental exercise there, but also an exercise to de-risk interoperability challenges. Perhaps, in the future, that may just become CWIX Part 1 in that safe laboratory environment in the JFTC. And maybe CWIX Part 2 is something involved in an exercise like this. So we take some of those interoperability challenges and we put them in the real world. You can identify many of those shortfalls in that closed environment, but where the rubber hits the road out here at sea or in the air, we have to understand that interoperability piece. I'm also very keen to understand the data challenges that get exposed by this. One of the key features of becoming a multi-domain operation-enabled alliance is we need to embark on this digital transformation, and that's something that's emerging now, rapid work to understand what a digital transformation for NATO looks like. But the key essence to both MDO and the digital transformation is going to be how we manage and share our data, how we release it, how we're able to share it at the speed of relevance. This exercise will start to expose some of that thinking. And finally, I'm really keen to understand how we can use the insights here in our role within the NATO defense planning process to be able to help provide advice to allies and to understand how we can transition these rapidly maturing unmanned capabilities into systems that nations can field as part of their capability targets. Because certainly in the maritime and land domains, we don't do that yet. We do have some unmanned systems that are accepted within the air domain, but we've got to make that next step in this domain, and I think we can do that. And I would also link as well to the Admiral's comment around Diana, this new Defence Innovation Accelerator. We sit as a non-voting member on the board of directors there, and will undoubtedly help shape the Diana portfolio. We may well get some insights from this exercise on that. So that's why we're here. And then my third point, what are we doing here? Well, I've mentioned that we're bringing our operational experimentation expertise. We're in fact heading up the experimentation, assessment and analysis syndicate. We've brought 18 people together. They represent expertise from our Joint Force Development Division, from experimentation, wargaming and lessons. We've got some representation from our defense planning team, and we've got representation from our capability development team as well from our headquarters. And thankfully, we're also supported by the UK and their Maritime Warfare Centre. They brought some extra capacity to that team, and I'm grateful. That syndicate is really focused on helping both the quantitative assessment, all that data that we're gathering, But most excitingly for an exercise like this, that qualitative data, that insight we get from Admiral Blount's Maritime Operations Centre, and that insight we get from the CTG on the ground, who can actually bring to life what these unmanned systems enable him to do in a way that just modelling and simulation won't do, or just doing trials without the insight from the operational commander. Because we have to understand the performance and the implications of using those systems if we're really going to move them forward and understand their value. So that's very significant. We will capture those insights in our experimentation, assessment and analysis report at the end of that, and I'm sure we'll look to the opportunity to expose those insights to the military committee when we've had time to digest them going forward. What else are we bringing? Well, of course, we sponsor the majority of the work under the Centre for Maritime Research and Experimentation, and it's great to see Dr. Warner here in the front row. They've been part of this exercise for 10 years, and a lot of the things we see playing out now in a very normalized way 10 years later were things that were just a twinkle in an eye 10 years ago in the CMRE. So they really do some cutting-edge science and technology work, and it's not that we're starting here. We've had to start that some time ago, so we've always got to be thinking now, how will this play out in that 10, 20-year time frame? So you're going to see some really exciting activity that they're demonstrating today, and I think particularly the work they can do to bring common standards to interoperability and to C2 will be fundamental for the Alliance to bring together this whole range of diverse unmanned systems. And finally, we're bringing a little bit of our open innovation. We have an innovation branch and hub within Allied Command Transformation, and within that, we do a lot to try and de-risk investment in common funding. We try and bring to life our concepts, but we also try and solve some of the problems of our friends in Allied Command Operations who bring us their pain points. And we try and develop in very short time frame, in months, not years, some minimal viable products or prototypes which we can then test with our colleagues in Allied Command Operations and help inform future capability development. You'll see 4 of those today, and it'll just give you a flavour of the kind of activity we are able to do in ACT. So that's what we're doing. So in summary, Allied Command Transformation, I mean, the clue's in the title, but this is really what we're about, identifying the future needs for the Alliance and charting that journey from current state to future state. We're here to support MARCOM, but also to understand the opportunities for the future, what it means for capability development, and how we can better inform allies who are on this journey with us. And what we are bringing is a specific syndicate and expertise to help with that analysis and assessment, and to really understand the operational benefit here and the implications of that work. Thank you.
Thank you, Admiral. Next, Mr. Giorgio Cioni, Director of Aerospace and Armament Capability at Defence Investment Directorate at the NATO HQ, will provide remarks and views from Brussels. Sir, the floor is yours.
Secretaries of State, Chair of the Military Committee, flag officers, distinguished guests, Chief of the Portuguese Navy, good morning to all, and thank you, Admirals, not simply for those words, but for your vision and leadership in creating and delivering dynamic messenger series. I don't have the nice histories, as Admiral Blount has just told us, about the origin of Dynamic Messenger, but I must say that it is a pleasure for me to return to this beautiful part of the world for such an exciting event. But before I continue, I too must extend my thanks once again to our fantastic host, the Portuguese Navy, without whom none of this would be possible. This is my 3rd time at REPMUS, and each time the facilities and magnitude of the event grow and become even more impressive. Very well done. These facilities are outstanding, and we at NATO are very pleased that this site has formally partnered with Diana, as it was just said, as one of the innovation test centers and I think that much good lies ahead. I feel very privileged to speak to you today. Since my first time here in 2019, the strategic context has changed in a way which makes REPMUS event even more important for the Alliance, and the upcoming dynamic messenger utterly crucial if we have to maintain our operational edge. Russia's invasion of Ukraine has changed the architecture of the European security and will have long-term implications for deterrence and defense posture of the Alliance, and it is impressive to see these events aligned towards the newly enhanced posture, especially considering the 360 degrees approach across the land, air, maritime, cyber, and space domains of operation. NATO, as you know, is currently undergoing the biggest overhaul of its collective defense since the end of the Cold War. The accession of Finland and Sweden will also decidedly impact the Alliance posture, capabilities, and center of gravity. We will soon have 32 allies at the table, and it is amazing to see many of these allies involved in this event here in Tróia. In the strategic headquarters, it is acknowledged that addressing tomorrow's challenges will require a broader understanding of and approach to security. During the summit, world leaders reiterated the key areas in which NATO's efforts must expand. These include strengthening deterrence and defense, an increased focus on resilience, including infrastructure, supply chains, and communications, and moreover, redoubling efforts to maintain our technological edge. I see REPMUS and Dynamic Messenger 22 as pioneer events in this area. These activities could and should be replicated across other domains and other events. I'm struck to see the pace of which things develop here. The introduction of operators so close to developers and scientists simply creates the condition to accelerate, and if the situation in the Eastern Europe has taught us anything, is that speed matters. I'm especially impressed by the multifaceted development I see here. It is not simply the technology. I see real progress in materiel standards and tactical publications as well, many of which will be informed and created from the results of the activities here this month. I raise this item for particular credit because we must not forget that interoperability is the DNA of the Alliance, and we see Alliance interoperability increase significantly in very innovative ways here in Tróia. I'd like to take a moment to highlight some of these key areas. Firstly, naval mine warfare, based out in Sesimbra. I was struck by the size and scale of the mine warfare component this year, especially with the advent of Dynamic Messenger. I commend the organizers for their deft management of so many assets, all of which have pushed the Alliance's ability to conduct naval mine warfare forward, especially in terms of data management between nations. As it was said, data are at the center of technological developments. It is true that we say that it's all about data. The second point I want to raise is about anti-submarine warfare, a key focus of many areas of NATO, and a particular headache for Admiral Blunt, I'm sure. It has been clear for a long time that we need a different approach, and avoid increasing tasks and decreasing assets are a recipe for disaster if not strongly addressed. The complexity of serials attempted is very impressive. I see bold innovation by the anti-submarine warfare teams here, which could deliver game-changing capabilities for the Alliance when we most need it. Third point, I'd like to give praise to the interoperability to interchangeability component, the eye-to-eye, as it came to be known over the past 3 years. We call it eye-to-eye. The concept of interoperability to interchangeability when it comes to maritime unmanned systems was born amongst this community and is waving its way into NATO's ambition for future operations. The ability for allies to take tactical command of each other's systems will provide agility and resilience to task force commanders in the future. Finally, I'd like to thank, as I said, distinguished visitors for taking the time to attend today's event, and I really hope you are impressed as I am. So, thank you so much.
Thank you, Director. Finally, it is my great pleasure to invite Dr. Helena Carreiras, Portugal's Minister of Defense, to the floor for her remarks. Madam Minister, the floor is yours.
Admiral, Chairman of the Military Committee, Secretary of State for Defense, Secretary of State for the Economy, Admiral, Portuguese Navy Chief of Staff, Vice Admiral, Commander, Allied Maritime Command, Vice Admiral, Chief of Staff of NATO Allied Command Transformation, NATO Director of Armament and Aerospace Capabilities of the Defense Investment Division, dear Admirals, Generals of the military and civilian authorities, entities, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is a great pleasure for me to be here today and observe firsthand the full extent of this important exercises. The scale and number of participants involved is a testament of the collective will and mutual interest driving our partners and allies. 25 navies, more than 20 research and development companies, 2 universities, and 8 different NATO entities, all engaged in experimenting cutting-edge technologies associated to unmanned vehicles and testing them alongside with conventional forces. It is worth highlighting the dual focus on interoperability and interchangeability, as recently mentioned. The development, testing, and validation of operational concepts and other relevant technological advances in maritime unmanned systems represents a goal of the utmost importance in the face of the significant geostrategic challenges we are currently facing. Achieving such goal will only be possible if we continue to work together, pooling our resources and the knowledge generated by our universities and innovation centers. In that sense, the exercises that have been taking place here in Tróia for the last few days present a unique opportunity to instigate further synergies, not only between allied and partner navies, but also between academia and industry communities. We must also recognize the importance of investing on much-needed experimentation. The REPMUS provides for a useful testing ground where NATO navies can collaborate. But the fact that the new NATO exercise, Dynamic Mansajet 22, also takes place this year immediately after REPMUS represents yet another welcoming development, as it aims to bridge a disconnection often found between operational experimentation and capability development. I am certain that both REPMUS and the Dynamic Mansajet will allow to build long-lasting bonds and cement mutual understanding between our navies and countries, therefore ensuring effective cooperation and coordination between all parts involved. Thank you very much.
I will now kindly ask you to exit the room by your group number and follow the hosts. All those in Group Alpha, please rise and follow Captain João Pereira, which is standing in the aisle. All those in Group Bravo, please rise and follow Commander António Marinha.